All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're a little late here for a moment of analysis. This is the Cincinnati Bearcat podcast, and once again, I have with me here is Matt Opper. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing good.
That's
It's
good.
game
That's
week,
good.
so there's a lot to be excited about. Even in a year
Absolutely
where you're kind of resetting, it's not like last year. We talked about that last week, but
right.
football's here.
A little bit of nerves, just
Yeah, for sure.
anxious to see what happens, what comes of it all. Uh, I don't know, man. We got some things to talk about today, particularly the game against Arkansas, the big game Saturday. Uh, and we can go over week zero a little bit. I'm be honest with you, I didn't really watch it too much. I watched
I watched a bit.
Nebraska, but um, yeah. And like I said last week, Nebraska's gonna find a way to lose, by a touchdown or less, and they definitely did it this time. I'm
That's pretty much all they do. That's their superpower is to lose one score games. Like it's kind of incredible.
like I said, the best bad team in America. Uh, and so I really wanted to get into. I wanted to touch on a little bit of kind of what before we get into uh too much of what our thoughts on the actual game will be. I thought we can kind of go over each team because I seen some interesting things from Arkansas last year that I think if they keep it up, it will be interesting for the Bearcats to kind of exploit. But on the flip side, there's hand in hand here some things that Arkansas could potentially exploit from the Bearcats. So what? Let's start with Arkansas, if you don't mind, and kind of go over your thoughts and feeling towards them right now as a team.
Yeah, so I think they're a really good team. They've definitely improved quite a bit under Sam Pittman. They have a real, kind of strong identity at this point. They've been with the same defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator for 3 years, so it's the third year with Pittman, third year running the same scheme. They're getting really good at it, and like this is the first time Arkansas has brought back a starting quarterback in a very long time. I think you had to go back to you know pre at least to the mid 2010. So it's been a long time for them having a guy who's just kind of rolling back into the same offense again. So I think they're really good, fundamentally sound. The scheme is good. They do have some major personnel pieces that they have to replace on that offensive side of the ball. Um, but they have, they've recruited a top 25 level. The problem is you're in the SEC West. So if you recruited at a top 25 level, you're like 10th, 11th in the
Yeah.
conference. That kind of puts you behind the eight ball, but relative to the rest of the country, they are recruiting very well. They're extremely talented. This is going to be a big challenge for the Bearcats for sure.
No, and I definitely agree with everything you're saying, especially the O line coming back. Watching some of their games, the O line played pretty well, right? But their year of experience is definitely should make them better, right? Coming back this year,
For
year
sure.
two, uh, and the quarterback, was it Jeffers? No,
KJ Jefferson, yeah.
Jefferson. Yeah, sorry, names fly. It's not even important. But he's a load. One thing I noticed about him is he's not terribly athletic, but once he gets up to speed, he's like his athleticism is very similar to Desmond's. Outside of Desmond is faster and not as big. Um, you
I,
know,
I thought you were going to go for the obvious. He's obviously next generation Cardale Jones. That's what he
yo,
is.
yes, like straight line. He'll run you over. He's not
Straight
going to
line
burn.
downhill. It's got
Right.
no side to side. It's all straight line power. Like they run a ton of QB power with him, and I would too if I had a guy who was 6'3", 240 and can move pretty well.
Right, exactly. I just when I look at him, I'm like, you can kind of, from what I see, he can be made uncomfortable. He can be made to make mistakes as far as last year went because it was first year starting. Uh, but I will say this: he should get better. He should advance the same as offensive line this year. And so I'm looking, and then the defense for me on Arkansas is really the thing that I'm kind of eyeing in this matchup. The offense is going to be difficult for this defense to stop. If Briggs, do his thing, then it'll be an interesting matchup. But it's their defense. Their defense brings back starters. Uh, and the between the linebackers and secondary, there was nobody that really was eye catching to me on the Arkansas defense.
Yeah, I'm
And
gonna
so
have to disagree there. Bumper Pool is a really, really good player. He's been playing for a very long time for them. He started 40 games. SEC,
that's
all SEC
oh,
player.
the
Like
criteria,
he's really good.
like no Bumper Pool. I forgot about Bumper. I don't know why, but overall, outside of Bumper, it was just especially their secondary really didn't blow me away. So I'm looking at this game and I'm like, okay, Bumper Pool aside, because I agree, I can't believe I forgot about him. But you're absolutely correct about Bumper Pool. But um, that aside, like they bring back a ton of not a ton, they bring back a good number of players on the defense. Their defensive line, from what I've seen, was all right. But for the most part, I'm looking at this. I'm really looking at this game, and I'm wondering, what that is the Cincinnati offense versus their defense, and so Arkansas going to be a real struggle, but I can see some opportunities here for the Cincinnati Bearcats team.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest matchup for this game is going to be the Bearcats offensive tackles against uh, Arkansas's defensive ends. So they brought in a couple of transfers, one from LSU, one from Georgia Tech. Their names are Landon Jackson and Jordan Dominic. Dominic came from Georgia Tech. He played a ton of football for them. Landon Jackson is a very, very talented, um, kind of a freak of a dude. He's 6'7", 280, plays pretty well. Um, Not a ton of experience. Dominic played forever for Georgia Tech. He was a very good player for them.
Right.
One of the best players on a bad team, kind of that situation. So they are trying to revamp that pass rush, and that pass rush has been the bane of their existence for the last couple of years. They just cannot get to the quarterback. If that is the case on Saturday, I like the Bearcats' chances because I really like UC's matchup with their receivers and their speed against Arkansas.
Yes.
Arkansas's got some guys. Catalan's really good, but I don't particularly like their corners. I think they're safe. Like I said, Catalan's the safety. He's a very experienced player, very good, just kind of a well-rounded, versatile player. I think he's going to be something that they have to worry about. But then again, he's got to match up with Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor. That's going to be kind of one of those matchups that you're going to be circling. But I really like the matchup of UC's wide receivers against their cornerbacks because I don't particularly like their depth or experience there.
No, and I completely agree, and that's really where I see I see where the matchup lies that could fall into Cincinnati's favor because when I look, so one thing I noticed about Arkansas when they went against a team that was adequate at passing, which amazingly in the SEC it wasn't that pass having a adequate quarterback wasn't that prevalent. See, SEC
Yeah.
for some strange reason, or at least the teams they played in the SEC, it was one of those things where it's like,
Well, the quarterback play in the SEC West has not been good for the last couple of years. Alabama kind of masked that because they're Alabama.
right,
But other than Bryce Young, like the quarterbacks, who was the second best quarterback in the
yeah,
in the West last year, Bo
yeah.
Nix,
Bo
you
Nix,
know,
Bo Nix, because he definitely did a number on them.
Haynes King at Texas A&M when he was healthy for 2 days.
So I would
Yeah, like
say
there weren't very good on that side.
Jefferson probably falls somewhere between 3 and 4 as the best quarterback in the conference last year. Um, at least the one that will give you the most trouble, right?
For
As
sure.
far as all around talent. Bo Nix definitely, like I said, he definitely gave Arkansas fits, and he gave LSU fits, I believe. But I will say that for me, that secondary can be exploited, and something they did when they did go against an adequate pass attack, they rushed three, and they dropped everybody into a zone, seemingly cover two, and they had problems with seams and slants. And so, for me, in that space, that's what I see. And they had trouble with speed. If they had speed as well at receiver, Arkansas, so they would try to mask it because here's the thing: Arkansas pass rush wasn't great, but they had a lot of power on their D line, and so a lot of times they'll rush three, and that those three D line will just kind of manhandle the offensive line of the other team, and sometimes they'll get to the quarterback with three, and that's what they kind of banked on when they played, from what I've seen, and so I wonder if they're gonna fall back to that this year, especially with the transfers they have um, on the D line to try to do that drop, you know, with a drop eight, rush three.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch because that's not really historically that's not been something that Barry Odom does a lot of.
Right.
He likes to have a 4-man front and really get after the quarterback. That was his MO back to his days calling defenses in Missouri.
Right.
Back when Missouri was, run into the SEC title game multiple times when they first came into the league. So that's kind of his background. He ran a lot of 3-man front last year. I don't think it's something he particularly wanted to do, but if you're really short on defensive tackles, that's a good option, and that has been the case for Arkansas for a while. They are returning a starter this year, so they have a little bit more experience at that nose guard position. But how much they go 4-2-5 versus that's they really play a true 3-3-5,
Right.
um, not like a 3-2-6 like UC does. So that'll be kind of an interesting thing to watch in terms of just schematic matchups, because there are a couple areas where UC has the potential to have some advantages against
Mhm.
Arkansas, and tight end play is definitely going to be one of them. Um,
Yep.
Arkansas didn't play the tight end particularly well. The SEC wasn't exactly full of them, and there wasn't exactly the West in particular was not full of offenses that feature the tight end as a receiver. But that's something where they were, Cameron Latu had a hell of a game against them for Alabama. I think he had almost 80 yards, a touchdown. He played really, really well. So that's an area where I think UC can exploit them a little bit is, playing Wiley and Leonard Taylor in space. I think is something that they
Right.
can have some success with if they can protect the passer.
No, and I completely agree. If you force them here, and this is where I'm struggling with Evan Prater versus Ben Bryant, right, in this defense, because let's say they do feel uncomfortable, one with the number of tackles they have, but also two with their pass defense. There's a chance they'll drop 8. You drop 8 with somebody like Evan Prater, it's a problem. It'll be a problem, right? Um, Ben Bryant also can run. I'm not taking away Ben Bryant athleticism, but he's a passer. That's what he looks to do first. And although if we're running seam routes with Trey Tucker and slants with Tyler Scott and any other receivers that's going to be out on the field side, uh, you know, or the
Marner and
boundary,
Thompson probably.
right? Uh, any receivers going to be on boundary. You know, but slants and seams with Tyler and Scott, it's going to be a problem if they can actually get the ball out. And the offensive line can block for the quarterback. So that's the passing game is something I'm looking at, and hopefully but if Ben Bryant can get the ball out to those guys on those routes, then that'll be great. But I'm saying like I'm thinking about Evan Prater cutting them up with his legs when they're trying to drop back. It's going to be, of course, they're going to have a spy on them, but their linebackers aren't really all that fast to me. I'm sorry, Bumper Pool, I understand he's good, but outside of him, I haven't seen any real speed in linebacker for Arkansas. And they played. Here's one thing I noticed about a couple games: they kind of start off slow. Their defense isn't. Their defense didn't necessarily attack early in the game. They kind of warmed up into attack mode as the game went on, which I found interesting. Like they just kind of sat back and watched what happened at first. And a lot of their players did. There wasn't a whole lot of attacking the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, but it's also a different defensive structure. Like this is not a defense that is designed to kind of attack downhill. It is more of a not a catching defense, but it's not something where you're kind of really going at the offense, dictating terms to them. That's not really how this scheme works. I mean, if you're playing a 3-3-5,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're playing like the old stack 3-3-5 like West Virginia used to, where you have, you know, all your gaps assigned for, and then you're kind of switching roles and responsibilities based on, who's in what gap based on the play call.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't do a ton of that. They're more of a they sit back in that cover two and they flood the underneath zones with their nickelbacks and with their linebackers,
Right.
and kind of force you to make tight contested throws. Um, if Evan Prater's there, that's something that is definitely going to be something to watch, because that is
Right.
something that he's not really shown anything because he's not really played. But if he can, that's something that he's going to have to do to win this game.
Right.
If it's Ben Bryant, I trust his ability to make those throws um, much more than Evan at this point, just because he has played more football. And I've seen him, fit the ball into tight windows at Eastern with not great receivers. He's working with much better raw materials here than he was there.
No,
And I think that'll allow him to be a much more effective player in the passing game.
no, and yeah, and that's what that's what makes me just interested in that whole thing. And of course, we both think it's gonna be Evan. So that's the main matchup that I see. Uh, this game, and let's look at the Arkansas offense a little bit more. Um, so Arkansas offense, like they got Jefferson, they got a slew of receivers that don't really have not really been tested. When I was watching the games that I watched, Traylon Burks was a huge part of their offense. He was their explosive guy. He was the big chunk yards guy. He was the
Yep.
guy that got them out of ruts when stuff was kind of in a lull. Um, and I hope they got somebody to replace that.
That is the question for that offense, because it's like let's take a step back and look at the offense schematically. Like, if you're thinking about this offense conceptually as a Bearcat fan, you want to think about UCF circa 2018, 2019, right?
That's what I know.
Because they are running that. They're very much from the Briles scheme. Kendall Briles is the offensive coordinator there. So what does that mean? That means you have wide receivers. They call it spitting on the sideline. So you are lining up on the sideline. When I say on the sideline, I mean on the sideline. Like, the most inside receiver will be at like the hash on the field.
Right.
That is a very extreme version. And the reason that they do that is that they force you to cover space. To quote Michael Lewis from The Blind Side, a football field is a tightly strung economy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to respond to whatever the opposition is doing. And if you don't do it, you're giving up free yards.
Right.
And free yards are bad yards, because that just means you're closer to a second, converting that first down and getting, keeping your drive going. So the reason that the Brown system has been so ubiquitous is because it's basically a cheat code for offense in college.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very simple. At its most basic level, it's really, really simple. Your outside receivers are all going to be running straight out goes or hitches at 10 yards. Your inside receivers are mostly going to be running slants, stops, wiggles, that sort of route.
Right.
And then you're going to tag on a run element to that, because everything is an RPO. And this is the biggest difference between this Arkansas team and the UCF teams, is that this Arkansas team has a legit threat at quarterback to run. Mackenzie Milton, before the horrific injury against USF, was a good runner, but he is not a threat to a defense the way that KJ Jefferson is. He's a threat in the way that he can take whatever you give in terms of yardage, but he's not somebody who's going to single-handedly take over a game with his leg. He's going to keep drives going and allow his receivers to make plays by continuing the drive. So that's kind of how Arkansas wants to attack. They want to attack the length, but also the width of the field. It's the width that is the key, because most defenses are by nature and inherently conservative, because you want to cover everything.
Right.
And the way that UC has dealt with this type of offense in the past, they used to be much more conservative about it. If you go back to 2017 and 2018, and they got ran out of the building in both those games.
Yep.
Now, when they see this offense, they challenge everything.
Yes.
And by challenge everything, I mean they're going to lock up their outside receivers. They're going to put the nickel back on man as well. Yep. And they're going to put as many guys as they can into the box. They'll play one-on-one outside and keep 6 in the box, which is – it kind of dictates to the offense, because then you're saying, we're going to take away what you want to do. This entire offense is based on, I take the free yards, right?
Yeah.
Baylor in a bowl game had literally 0 quarterbacks against North Carolina, and they ran for almost 700 yards. Because their entire offense is, you going to give us this? Okay, we're going to take it. And we're just going to run GT counter. We're just going to run inside zone all day.
Right.
And until you kind of force them to get out of what they're trying to do or stop what they're trying to do, there's really no off switch on this offense. It reminds me a lot of the peak 90s Spurrier offense, where the base play in both the run game and the pass game meshed so perfectly that there was no off switch to the offense.
No. So, right. and it was kind of, I would say it was somewhat of a slower version of the offense as well. I know that the speed had a lot to do with Hupple, however you say his name, the guy that was once part of the
Hypel.
Hypel. There we go. The coach, but I know that speed was a lot of his design. Like he wanted to go
Yeah.
fast. Uh, but and and also another thing that UC did really well is you know their they took their linebackers, found the most physical, athletic specimens they could find, uh, and kind of said, "Hey, you're going to play linebacker, and if we have to build you up, we will. If we have to create you, we will. But we need you to cover space. We have to be able to cover space." And that's against every team we play as far as in our conference because that's how they run. They play in space. Every team in this conference does, and so it was a brilliant strategy by Fickle to understand what's going on, to walk out of his comfort zone and say, "Hey, we need to do something different." Because once again, you can tell by Fickle offense, he is a conservative man by nature, like you said. The thing he's conservative. He doesn't like the flash. He won't score 65 points on the team unless it was accident. Um, you know. And so, but this Arkansas team, I agree. Their running game, like you said, there's a lot of GT counters, and and they also do a lot of inside zone. Uh, and it makes sense with the size backs they have. All their backs are big for the most part. um, and they want to bludgeon you to death. They want to beat you down, and hopefully you give in and you fall apart at some point. Uh, I don't know if that's a great strategy for SEC because everybody is big and strong in the SEC. Um, but when you're playing a team that's maybe like from a different conference where they don't have the quite the um, depth, that's a good strategy to um, utilize. And so I don't know. I think their running game is really good. There's not a whole lot of teams as good as them when it comes to running game. Their linemen are really good at run blocking and understanding the scheme as well as executing the scheme. So that's something we're gonna have to really look at too. Like how does UC handle dealing with, because the thing about UC defense is it's hard to block. That's the truth. Tulsa did the best, and I think this Arkansas team has a very similar style of blocking.
Yeah.
Uh, as Tulsa did.
Yeah, and like Tulsa has done the majority of their damage the last couple of years, not by run, like they've just run the inside zone because the secret to UC's defense in terms of run stop and run fits and everything is how they handle pulling guards, pulling tackles, split zone. They murder those actions. Like
Right.
it is amazing what they do. What considering the lack of bodies they're committing to that. They generally only play the run with five, maybe six. They might add in a seventh, layer in a seventh player as a safety,
Mhm.
but like the safety comes in after they force a cutback and they'll
Right.
clean it up at the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's what Brian Cook did so well. That's what, Deshaun Pace does so well
Mhm.
is they kind of layer so that they are attacking not at the same time. They attack at a slightly different cadence,
Right.
which means even if someone is there to pick up pace, no one's there for the second safety.
Exactly.
Um, and this year it's going to be interesting to see what they do without such a massive physical presence at that that safety spot in Cook. Um, it's probably going to be Brian Threats because Javon is more of a field player. He plays that center field very well. They
Yeah.
can invert those responsibilities, but that's where he's most natural and most comfortable and makes the most plays. Um, Threats is the exact opposite of Brian Cook.
Yes.
5'10", 190. Like his willingness to stick his face mask, into a fan is the same, but it's just a different effect.
Right. Right. And everything I'm hearing about Brian Threats is like you said, he wants to stick his nose in the middle of the pile. He wants to be in there on the tackle. He wants to throw all 190 pounds at whatever freight train's coming at him. He don't care. So it's one of those. That's kind of what you want from that what is it? I call it strong safety. I don't know what UC call it. I haven't really, but
That's the. I think the terminology they use is field and boundary, but I could be wrong on
okay. Yeah, so the boundary safety, kind of what you want from that boundary safety, the way they utilize it. And once again, they do, depending on the lineup, they change it around, right?
Yeah.
Who's ever is handling whatever the role is, the assignment is, it depends on the alignment. But we've seen where Hicks has been exploited because he's not really an attack um, type of player. And so there's been a couple times Hicks had really good hits, but a lot of times he's been exploited as someone who's not as willing to come down and just
Yeah, for sure. Like, the offense knows,
right,
oh, this guy's less willing to just throw his body in there and fuck shit up.
right,
So
right,
like they try to engineer situations where he's the guy who's trying to make that fill play. And he can do it, but like he's much more he takes a couple extra steps. He doesn't get there quite in as much time. Whereas
right.
Cook, and this year Threats is going to be like that. And Omarion Smith is the other person I've heard who's just willing to just do some fucked up shit in terms of launching his body at people.
Exactly.
And if he's doing that to teammates at camp, I don't think that's really going to change much with the opposition. So that's something that they're going to have to definitely play. I mean, like Arkansas doesn't have a bell cow of a back.
Right.
I'm sure they want Rocket Sanders to be that guy because he's such an intriguing combination of size because he's 5'10", about 230, but also fast. Like that dude ran a 10-4 100-meter dash.
Right.
And I don't know if you've seen, most people who run that speed at the 100, they're not built like running backs. They're built like cornerbacks at best. That's a lot of speed in a big package.
We have a guy who ran that speed, and his name is Mc, goodness gracious, our running back
McClellan.
McKellen, and he's definitely built like a DB. So your point is taken. But no, that's what I'm really worried about. That's why I'm really worried about the running game, and it's not because I think they're going to break a bunch of runs and cut us up. I think because they're gonna just let's just put it this way: the Godfather should get some run in this game if they play the way that I think they're going to play.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that there is going to be much. They're going to play a lot of defensive linemen in this game.
Right.
Like they have a top 5 that is pretty good. But the guys beyond that, they don't really know, but they're going to find out because they're going to have to play.
Oh yeah.
And for sure, Corleone is going to have to give some minutes just spelling Briggs. And I don't know how much 4 down they're going to play. I mean, the depth of this team is not so much in the linebackers as it or their defensive line as it is in the linebackers.
Right.
Because they got 5 guys who can really, really go.
Right. And I do believe that, I do believe they're gonna do a lot of switching between 3-3, and 4-3, and I would say that they're going to almost have to. They're going to test it. They're going to test with 3 at first. They're going to see how well they do with 3 at first, I believe, and then I think once they get a good gauge and they ain't going their way, I think UC will switch more to the 4 because, as we all know, Tressel, he has, learned the 3, but his thing is 4. He likes 4 down. He's from that generation. That's where you come from. That 4-3, 4-2-5. That's his wheelhouse. And so if things, and we seen it last year, right? When things wasn't looking good, he went 4. He was like, okay, I get what we're trying to do, but 4, and he would definitely go 4 down lineman. He didn't hesitate to do that. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and your point about his base and his background being in that Michigan State 4-3 odd front, cover 4, that's where he lived for so long. That coming to this is different, but this defense is more similar to that defense than I think the average fan knows because The average fan just kind of counts body types.
Right.
You got three guys with their hand in the dirt. You have three linemen.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really account for the fact that the middle linebacker for the Fast between DeBlanco and Brian Wright is basically a defensive tackle.
Right.
UC basically plays bear on standard downs every down.
That's true.
It doesn't get talked about that way, but that's what they do. That's the general structure of their defense. They're going to put a body on all five gaps and make you figure out what to do with it. And at the same time, like, they have the flexibility to kind of have still a pure edge rusher. They don't really have that guy on this team so far that we know about. I mean, somebody could emerge, but there's no, Maje tearing off the edge. It's going to be a different feel this year versus previous years, just because you got to suit the defense to your personnel. And Jabari Taylor is a very good player, and Malik Vann is a very good player, but they're not that type of player.
Right. So, we're getting a little bit more into this space. I kind of want to get into strategy and a little bit more in depth when it comes to this game, and we can stay on Arkansas offense and kind of roll on from there. Now, we know that Cincinnati still has a 260-pound, 250, 260-pound middle linebacker, but he's not built like Brian Wright. He's not built like DeBlanco, but he's around the same weight. Can he be as disruptive? Do he have the same, like, he's faster probably than both of them?
Yeah.
But will he have the same disruption of capabilities in your mind as those two? Because they would blow plays apart often.
Yeah, I think he does. He's shown it in a small sample size. Last year, he played almost exclusively third downs and was an absolute monster, twisting and stunning with the nose guards and the defensive tackles. That was his role last year. Is not going to be quite as balls to the wall as that, just because he's going to be playing in every situation. That doesn't mean that he's not going to be that guy on third downs again, but they also could be bringing in, the young Dingle. They could be bringing in, Jaheim Thomas in that spot. They could bring in any number of guys in that spot and get production. But I doubt that Will Huber leaves the field very much at all this year. And I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be a very good player. But it's just such a big expansion of his role that we're not really going to know.
Now, we know DeBlanco had the tendency to kind of get exploited in the pass game a little bit. He didn't change direction all that very fast, but he did his job well, except in pass coverage. And another thing,
what are you talking about? Arguably the defining defensive play of the season was him sneaking that pass and picking off Clayton Tune in this Houston game.
Yeah, I know that was he got his hands just having to go up in the ball.
He was reading the quarterback's eyes, drifting back into that passing lane. I'm not going to hear any slander about Joel DeBlanco.
No, here's the thing about Joe. That play was amazing. I watched it just the other day, and I was like, he played that. Because he was really supposed to be the spy. He was just spying, and you like, oh, pass. And he jumped up and did. But for the most part, when he goes into, like, deep middle, he's a little bit slow to his spot. Like, when it comes to, like, there's been plenty of times the pass was kind of in his zone, and he just whiffed on it. I'm wondering, like,
yeah, but that was not his role. He did it occasionally, and if he got caught, he got caught. But that was not his role. His role was to be a big neck roll linebacker, like from the 1990s.
That's true.
That's what he was supposed to do, and that's what he did.
But with Wilson Huber's capabilities and his a little bit more, him being more athletic, do you think they will use him for that deep middle coverage type more than they did, more than DeBlanco?
Possible. I mean, we'll see. I think Jaheim Thomas is a much more active and much more mobile linebacker than even Wilson Huber is. Huber is very good forward and backwards, but I don't really know laterally how good he is. Just because that's not something that we've asked him to do,
right?
Or not we, but the staff has asked him to do as a defensive player. They've asked him. They carved out a very specific role for him last year because he played so well in camp that they had to do something for him. Like they had to find a way to get him onto the field occasionally. And I think like the most likely candidate to take over the role that he had last year is Ivan Pace.
Makes sense.
Because he's a big fire plug dude who's just quick and slithery and is just going to be a really hard guy to block, especially on those obvious passing situations.
And this linebacker core, this is something I really want to look at because this linebacker core is something UC have always had pretty decent linebacking cores. They never had anything like this in a while. I don't remember them really have anything like this in general, where they just have 5, 6 guys they can plug in, and hopefully the production won't drop much, right? Uh, I'm looking at these guys. They're all different type of sizes, all different type of speeds, all different type of athleticism. Um, I don't think Arkansas has ever really seen anything like this. But let's be honest, a lot of SEC teams they kind of pick the linebackers they want. They're all relatively similar sizes and similar athleticisms, and you just plug them in.
Well, yeah. As soon as Alabama stopped running 3-4 with 6'4", 270-pound thumpers in the middle,
right?
That was the death knell for that particular kind of guy. That guy is now a defensive end shifting to defensive tackle.
Right.
Like that guy used to play linebacker, but now all those body types play line. Just because if you want to compete with Alabama, you kind of have to do that. Like that's just kind of the the evolution of the sport at this time. Is that you need more speed and athleticism on the field at those spots because teams are so much more dynamic offensively than they've ever been before. And the rules have something to do with that. Like it's a very offensive friendly game, the way it is called today. I don't want to discount that, but like the general structure and how games are called in terms of what's a flag and what's not hasn't really changed in about 5 years. And that's long enough where you can kind of see this proliferation of everyone is going lighter, quicker, faster versus getting bigger and slower.
No, and I agree. But UC has kind of taken that and took it to the next level, right? They're literally taking safeties and big cornerbacks and be like, hey, so you're gonna be a linebacker now, right?
For sure.
You see it. You see the problem with it when they play somebody like Alabama because a lot of these SEC teams they're going smaller, but everybody's still 230, 220 at least, right? Everybody between 240 and 220.
Well, yeah, but like we're seeing the difference between the teams that select and the teams that recruit because there is a limit to the kind of guy that UC can get. Mm-hmm. There is a limit to the kind of guy that Arkansas can get. So you have to build your defense to fit into the types of bodies you can recruit and you can get into your school. Whereas Alabama's just like, I want this kind of guy. Oh, there's 10 of them in the country. Okay, I'll take this model here.
Right.
Or I want this kind of really long, rangy corner. Oh, there's like 15 of them. Okay, we'll take that one there. They pick who they want. They don't really
everybody else.
everyone else recruits. Right. Alabama, Georgia, Clemson to some extent. These teams select. USC. When USC is really good, they select. They have first right of refusal on everyone on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So if you're of any good from Colorado over, USC's like, I'll take you and you. I'm good on you. You're not going to do. And Alabama kind of does that, in everywhere, but but like that's the kind of difference in terms of how you build your team and how you structure your offense and defense. You structure it around the kinds of guys you can get.
And Ohio State does it north, right? But when you look, for instance, Alabama, you've seen a problem with having that type of linebacker when they play Alabama, but you've seen the type of disruption it can have when they play somebody like Georgia. Different offensive systems, right?
Yeah.
But, do you like when you look at a team like Arkansas? What are the speed and disruption and disruptive nature of these linebackers really cause issues to that offense? From what I see, I'll say yes, but I'm interested in your opinion.
So if you go back and watch the Alabama game closely, it was not that UC was getting absolutely mowed down. It was more that they had guys in positions and they missed tackles that they had made all year.
Right.
And part of that is that you're dealing with a different level of linebacker, or you're dealing with a different level of running back and a different level of offensive lineman.
Mm,
So the half a hand that you got on you from Alabama is different than the half a hand that Tulsa gets on you or that
right.
UCF gets on you. It's a different experience because you're dealing with a higher base level of talent. Um, I don't think it's an issue where there is a, like a lot of talk has been bandied about, especially in the aftermath of the game. Like there's a fundamental flaw to how UC is approaching game. Like that's not accurate because it's football. There are trade-offs
Right.
in everything you do. If you choose to be good at one, like how you structure your defense, there's going to be pluses and minuses to everything. There's pluses and minuses to every decision. Like in football as in life, every decision has a plus and a minus.
Hmm.
You try to weigh them as best you can so that the overall pluses for your decisions are more than the inherent flaws with that. But there are some times where you're going to run into people, obstacles, teams, whatever, that are just going to have the perfect, like a key and a lock
Right.
solution to what you do.
Right.
And when that happens, you throw your hands up and say, good game. Like you can't, it's like you hit us exactly where we're designed to hit. Like you hit the thermal exhaust port. Congratulations.
But okay, I'm gonna bring up the Alabama game real quick, and then I'm done with it because I'm over it. But the the button that you push for Cincinnati was to stop Desmond Ritter, and they didn't stop Desmond in a normal way. They stopped him by blocking out his passes. Who think of that? Who thinks like that? How can you time your like? I watched the game the other day. I was confused. Like, how did they even get their players to do this thing that they were doing, knocking down balls off the sky? How do you? I understand they're dealing with a different level and type of player and different athleticism and instincts. But goodness gracious, like if they did knock the balls down, you see them in the game. That's neither here nor there. Now we're on. So the disruption of the linebackers against Arkansas can be an issue. Now the DBs for Cincinnati. This is where we are all trying to figure out what do we have, how will it work, what is the goal, what how effective will they be? Do we start JQ Harway or do we start who's a Shepherd?
Jaquan's been groomed for that spot for the last
Right,
2 years.
right,
I think I'll put it this way: JQ Hardaway's coming, and whether
mm-hmm,
or not he starts game one, he is going to start the last game of the year,
right,
no doubt. That's happening. Where in between now and then that he becomes the starter, I don't know. But Jaquan is he's basically Cam Jeffries. Like
right.
he's coming. Hold on as long as you can, but it's not going to be lasting long.
The more talented in athletic Cam Jeffries. He's a 4 star, but I understand the analogy. And that's the thing. He's a 4 star. You're not talking about Jaquan Shepard, who was some low 3 star who got molded. This is a very talented individual. But good thing about Cincinnati is they have three. They have three cornerback positions. Now I will say this: Taj Ward is not my favorite DB on that team. I really would appreciate if he wasn't on the field. And this is nothing against Taj Ward. This is all about production. I don't dislike the man as an individual. I don't know this man. It's all about what I've seen from production wise. And Taj Ward, he has a tendency to get beat badly often. He's sound as far as picking up a tackle. He's sound as far as zones. Like if he's in a zone, he knows the spot. He knows where to get there. Man to man, he is not good at a man to man. And
I mean, it really depends on how you play him in that nickel spot. So, like,
right,
UC doesn't press. UC presses on the boundary, or they did last
right,
year. So last year they pressed on the boundary, but they didn't really press on the field or from that slot position. Under Freeman, they pressed everybody. All three of those
right,
guys were nose to nose 90% of the time. That's not something that Tressel believes in as a fundamental tenet of defense. So that's not what they
right.
do. And that really takes away the biggest asset that Taj has, which is his length. He's just a big dude, long neck, long
Mm-hmm.
arms, just long. He is a very very big nickel, you know, cornerback. So he has a chance to kind of envelop smaller receivers, but that really only comes into effect if he is being played as a press corner, which is not something that
Right.
they do under Tressel. So if they're going to play that position the way they played it last year, I think that's going to be an area where a lot of teams are going to circle and say, we're going to go after this, just because he's being asked to do something that I don't think particularly suits his skill set.
Right. And that's really where I can agree with that. I'm not going to disagree with that. I will just say that in my own opinion, I think if they are going to give me 1 second here, if they are going to do the whole thing, I know they were also talking about putting, I believe, was it Shepard at that as well, the nickel, um, or I can't remember who they were talking about putting at the nickel.
I can't remember who they have as that backup.
But they were saying that he was doing really good and he was actually trending towards starting over Taj. So we'll see how that goes. I know that I just remember every time I look up, like I'll see a big pass play and I'm like, who was guarding that man? And it was number 15. And I was like, why are we still doing this to ourselves? I understand that Bush needs a breather, but right now, so it's one of those things where I once again I don't want to come down on him, but I understand your point on him. But now Bush, I know they're talking about boundary. Bush is a field guy. He, I believe, now back in 2000 was 2018 where he got the start against ECU. Was he boundary or field? I don't
I
remember.
thought it was Field.
He was field, and he played extremely well. I mean, extremely well. He had what, and then with two interceptions, or he had an interception. He almost had another one. He was played extremely well in that position. I don't necessarily think he has the makeup speed for. I'm talking about like straight line speed for boundary. But for that field position, I do think he can do it very well, especially considering the fact that they don't press over there much, and I think that'll do him very well. Because when they did put him on boundary, he was getting he was struggling a bit when he played Georgia against
Well,
uh
yeah, but that was George Pickens. That's a different.
yeah, I get it. I get it.
Like they don't have. So Arkansas doesn't have that kind of receiver. Like Traylon
Right.
Burks is that dude, but they don't really have that guy. Like they're really, really banking on Jaden Hazelwood being that
Yeah.
guy. He played okay on a pretty by Oklahoma standards, mind you. So like that's a very high bar on a pretty mediocre Oklahoma offense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can he be that guy? Sure, maybe he's got like the physical tools. That's not a doubt. Like he's, five-star player. Like that capability is there, but is the consistency? I mean, we're gonna find out.
I mean, like they're gonna have to figure something out, right? In order to be in this game, because you run it down Cincinnati's throat. I mean, according to Tulsa and according to Alabama, yes. But is that a game-winning strategy? Not for Tulsa. It hasn't been. And honestly, I know Arkansas feel like they are on Alabama level for some odd reason, but they're not. They're not.
No, they're not. They're not the same level as Alabama. Like
And so
Alabama's offensive line was again bad by Alabama standards last year,
right.
but it was never a question of talent. It was a matter of getting the guys to play together well, and they couldn't
Mhm.
do that until the Georgia game, the first one, and then they started playing really well together. Um,
Right.
I don't know what it was. I think it was the change at center that probably had the most to do with it. That got them organized and cohesive and pretty well. Um, and like Arkansas's got a really good center too. Like this is the matchup between Briggs and Stromberg is going to be fascinating to watch because
Yes. Yes.
that's going to go a long way to determining this game. Like if either one of those guys can kind of show out and dominate that spot, it really changes the tenor of this game. Just because it's really hard to run anything, especially polling guys,
Hmm.
if your center is getting blown up and pushed back 2-3 yards into the line of scrimmage. Conversely, it's really hard to run pick and twist when your defensive tackle or nose guard is getting mowed down and just getting completely collapsed. Like if either one of those things happen, it's a like that team has a very very good chance to win. If they play to a stalemate, then you got to go to the other matchups to figure out where it's going to be. But that's like a key matchup for me.
No, and I completely agree because here's another thing that I'm looking at when it comes to defensive line. Last year we did have a problem. It was a good problem when it came to our D end. Goodness, my brain is not working today. I apologize.
Majay.
Majay, disruptive as he was on the passing plays, on the run game, sometimes he was a liability because he'll overshoot. He wouldn't really. Sometimes he wouldn't stay in his pocket. He sometimes he wouldn't sit, and I do believe Taylor and Van are much prone to kind of following the pool more than Magi was. They're more prone to kind of sit and kind of slide their feet down the line of scrimmage, kind of following the play. Just do the small things that D linemen do in order to be where they need to be. I believe this line is going to be a lot more productive when it comes to stopping the run because of the absence of Magi. As much as I love him, as much as I love him, he caused issues in the run game sometimes.
Yeah, but like that really goes back to your structure though, because
Right.
UC kind of had to. A lot of the teams that have gone to the a 3-man front in the last couple of years have run what they call a tight front, which is you have
Right.
both defensive end line up on the inside shoulder of the tackle.
Right.
Tight, as in uh, like you just want to kind of condense the space that the offensive line has to play with, right? That's not what UC did. They couldn't really play Majay in that position too often. They
Right.
did it, and he wasn't great. Like a lot of the guys who, when it came to the draft process, when they were looking at Majay,
Mm-hmm.
they'd look at the tape and be like, "What is this guy doing? Like this is bullshit. This is not how he's going to play in the NFL." And it's not.
Right. Yeah.
He is a classic wide 9 defensive end.
Yeah.
And in that very wide position, you can afford to be a little bit lighter because you're faster.
Right.
But if you're playing inside the tackle and you're a little bit lighter and you're not super disciplined in terms of how you read the blocking scheme, you can get taken advantage of, and he did at times. But the plus of him just causing so many headaches for offensive coordinators all week. Like how the fuck are we going to block this guy? Well, let's put 2 tight ends there, and we're not going to put him into the route. We're just going to make it a longer run for him.
Right.
And like a lot of teams in conference did that kind of shit to him just to kind of minimize his impact because they knew they had no chance of blocking him.
No, and I completely agree. Like for instance, even when you look at the Alabama game, Alabama had a hard time dealing with him. They had a very hard time dealing with him, and it's one of those things where they couldn't pass. They had a hard time passing the ball, being able to pass the ball because of the athleticism of the linebackers, and my job was causing headaches. And so, when you look at this defensive team, Cincinnati team, there's opportunities there for them to be good. Arkansas may not be able to pass the ball, and that may be to their detriment, right? Because when you flip to the other side and you look at Cincinnati versus Arkansas's DBs, Cincinnati versus Arkansas's linebackers, when it comes to the passing game, and to a certain extent the running game, in Cincinnati's O line. Let's talk about Cincinnati's O line because this is where I want to touch for a second. They are trying to spin this thing up a little bit and say, "Hey, I know we had starters from last year. One got injured. That's fine. We can put this guy in. I know we had a starter last year, but he was kind of the starter due to circumstance. You know what I'm saying? And so they kind of, and plus when you throw in a new offensive line coach, it kind of causes.
Well, yeah. Anytime you have a new position coach, you're gonna see shakeups. That's just gonna happen. I don't think anybody expected it to be this extensive and to this degree.
Right.
But like the changes were gonna happen, and like moving O'Quinn inside to guard makes total sense. Absolutely. If he's gonna have a future in football, it's a guard. He's a serviceable That's the problem. Right. He's a serviceable college tackle who has great technique and can make up for his lack of physical attributes with technique against college players. But you put him on the outside at right tackle in the NFL, just toast. Like he's got no shot. At guard, his lack of length in his arms is not a problem. Um, at guard, he's pretty long for a guard. Um, so yeah, like it's just that one is not surprising. The start of Joe Huber is going to be
Yes,
the most fascinating thing to watch.
that's what I'm
Um,
interested in. Absolutely.
and by all indications, he is going to start against Arkansas. Um,
Yeah.
does that mean he starts and they split reps with Metz and whoever, or Cam Jones or whoever? Um, that's possible.
Cam
We'll
Jones,
see. I
from
mean,
what
they
I,
have
you
enough.
know,
Yeah, they
Cam
have
Jones
enough
hasn't been talked
guys.
about.
They have enough guys where they can actually probably rotate
Right.
up to 9,
Right.
probably, and be comfortable.
Hmm.
Um, are you going to rotate 9 against Arkansas? I mean, if they do, that is a big call because
Right.
that is a huge, testament to your, you know, faith in these guys to execute at a high level. But can they do it? I mean, we'll see. And the biggest thing to watch with Huber is how he performs because he's probably going to be ended up not on Dominic but on Jackson. And Jackson is a freak of freaks.
Hmm.
He's 6'7", 280. Played for LSU as a freshman. Like this guy is a potential problem. And if they can't handle that edge, regardless of who the quarterback is, and
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to be Brian at this point.
Right.
I'd like to see Evan just as an experiment, and I think,
Hmm.
I mean, but like this is me back, NCAA football. If my two quarterbacks were equal,
Yeah.
roughly, and one was a senior and one was a freshman, I'm starting the freshman
I'm
because
starting the
he
freshman.
might win 4 Heisman's.
Exactly.
It's possible.
And I get to have him for a few more years, and that experience actually mean a little bit in NCAA.
Yeah, but
So,
I think the biggest thing conceptually thinking about this for me is you can run your offense. Whatever Gino's idealized version of the offense is,
mhm.
you can run that with Ben Bryant
Yes, yes,
because you have everything else in place. You have a pretty good offensive line. You have you might not have Jerome Ford anymore, but you have a pretty deep and talented stable of running backs.
hmm,
You have really good weapons at tight end and wide receiver.
right,
Like you can run your stuff. If Evan's the quarterback, you can't open the playbook to that degree just because the things that he is good at this stage in his career are not the things that the rest of this offense is good at this stage of the career. And it might be that simple in terms of making this decision. It's like Ben has the capability to allow this offense to reach its maximum potential.
yes,
So we're going to do that. And we're going to give him that chance to do it. And if he doesn't do it, then we go to Evan and then we change things to suit what Evan does, which means a lot more QB run game.
yep.
Not to say that, it's not that Ben Bryant is a statue. He had a fucking 40-yard touchdown run in one of the games he played in 2019 or 20. I can't remember
Memphis,
which
in
one.
Memphis, yeah, I think it's Memphis, or
So
was
yeah,
it?
like
Yeah,
he can run, but it's not the defining characteristic of what he is as a
right,
quarterback. Evan at this point, that running ability, you know, he is an A plus 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 runner.
right,
You know, Dez was like an A.
yeah, B plus, B plus. Uh, um, no, I agree. I think Ben Bryant is the best suited. And one thing I do believe is, uh, Gino, he likes to test defenses early. He likes to go in and throw it over your heads just to see kind of what happens. Are y'all looking for this? Will y'all, are y'all prepared for this? So, and Bryant, I do believe Ben Bryant has that arm and the pocket awareness to kind of give you that early in the game, that first just 40-yard pass and kind of see what happened. And I'm interested as far as our the offense go. Also, the running backs once again. Corey Kiner, what kind of game does he have? McClellan, does he get some time? Uh, Ryan Montgomery is interesting to me. I know a lot of people don't talk to him, but the way that he kind of just slips in and out of tackles, the way that he can contort his body and keep his balance is unique in a way that I've never really seen before out of a running back. So I'm always interested in seeing if that is a thing that can give him the nod, is his ability, his balance, and his ability to kind of get out of situations that nobody else can get out of. And then you have Miles, who everybody said is the closest thing forward we got on the team. So that's always going to be something to look forward to and kind of see how that pans itself out and works itself out. Because I think they're going to go four. I think they're going to play all four.
Yeah, they will.
It just depends. Do McCulling has completely has his feedback. We see he finally's been getting on the top MPH boards during the practices that they put up on Twitter. So he finally been up there with them. So it seems like he getting his speed back. So we'll see how everybody pans out and what happens as far as that go. I'm very interested in this game because it's going to be a complete chess. It's going to be a chess. It's a game of chess. This game is. It's going to be my strength is your weakness, and your weakness is my strength. This is that type of game.
Yeah.
And whoever is can exploit that better is who's going to come out on the end of this game with a win. I know a lot of people, especially the fans of the other team, believe that it's going to be a blowout. And hey, everybody sometimes feel like their team going. We thought UC was going to blow out Tulsa twice, and we saw that came. We saw that ended. So
yeah, like UC had a chance in both those games to like put their fucking
right.
foot on their throat and just decline the opportunity.
Right.
They're not going to have the chance against Arkansas because I think these two teams are pretty evenly matched.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a very interesting game. I think that UC's experience playing this kind of offense does give them a little bit of comfort and peace of mind. But KJ as a runner is kind of an X factor for me. Like the three matchups that I'm watching are KJ's ability to escape and make plays with his legs against these linebackers. It's Jawan Brooks against Sternberg at center and nose tackle. And then the other one on the other side of the ball is, for me, it's Wiley against Bumperpool and the safety, Catalan.
But if he and Wiley, though, like together, is going to cause.
Yeah, if they can win that matchup, I really like UC's chances, especially if Ben's the quarterback, which we expect at this point.
Yes.
I just think they're going to have a really hard time matching up with Wiley. And I think the biggest difference in this offense in terms of its structure and how it's conceived, like personnel-wise, I don't think there's going to be a big difference. I think it's really going to be in play selection and when you call certain plays, right? UC has not been a good team when it comes to exploiting matchups. Like if they have a matchup win, they don't really go to it. Like Alec Pierce should have had 1,400 yards last year. Like honestly, he should have broken Marty's record, single season record. Like he should have. He was that good and that dominant. But UC didn't run the offense to get him the ball. And I think having a new guy calling the plays, even though he knows these guys, he's been here for a long time, but I just think having that different perspective, I really want, and this might be a me wanting more than what Gaduli actually thinks.
Right.
But I think for the longest time, UC couldn't hunt matchups because it didn't have advantages.
Right.
And they still won a fuck ton of games. So who am I to say it doesn't fucking work? But now they have advantages. And they have advantages in different spots and guys that are really unique and really hard to guard. Like Trey Tucker is a fucking nightmare.
Yes.
Josh Wiley is a nightmare. Yeah. Like, let's take advantage of their ability to win matchups one-on-one.
And then putting Taylor and then putting Tucker and Scott on the same side of the field and said, "Hey, run these routes." And they're like, "We got to guard both of these motherfuckers."
Yeah. I mean, that stresses the defense,
right?
In really profound ways, because it's like, you can't have your safety. You just putting your safety in a really bad spot,
right? And what I would say the last thing I'm looking at is I noticed Fickle seems a whole lot more confident through this offseason than I've seen him. And like I get it, but it almost seemed like this offseason he was kind of like, last year happened, but here we are. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, is this the same Fickle? Hey, Fick, this is not what
he is so much more comfortable in this role.
Yes.
Than in being the guy that is hunted. And in conference, he's still going to be the guy that's hunted. Everybody wants UC.
Right.
But nationally, everyone, I mean, they're paying the due respect I mean,
Right.
they got a token top 25, votes to start the year, but it's like what 23rd.
Yeah.
That's not really like that's when people that's the spot where you get people who are like, I don't know anything beyond the top 10 teams. I'm just gonna like
Right.
sprinkle in some guys here,
Yeah.
and that's fine. They've earned that. They've earned that respect. But I really think he's looking forward to the rebuilding process more than anything else.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, so I just think this game coming up is gonna be something exciting. We'll definitely once it's over, we're probably gonna talk a little bit more about the week 1 next week than week 0 because week 0 was ho hum. But so we'll probably get a little bit more of what happened through week 1 next week. But definitely get into this game and discuss this game next week.
Yeah, can't wait for Scott Frost, Alabama quality control analyst.
And that's definitely going to happen. Um,
There's always a home at the Nick Saban School for Wayward Boys.
yes, to teach you how to become an adequate head coach. Uh, but definitely, we thank you once again for watching this. And we'll definitely be back next week. And you guys have a great night. Thank you.